Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. Hey everyone, and welcome to Raising Parents, the Parenting Science Insights podcast. Produced by LMSW, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Dina Sargeant. Now, let's get started. Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode. So today we're talking about civic engagement. When I first heard of this, I pretty much had no idea what it was and what it meant. I had to Google it to make sure, and it was very similar. It's focusing on about community and how to help children sort of engage in the community and allow them to sort of develop a sense of civic duty to society. So sort of help me go through this and sort of explain it better than I just did is Dr. Kelly. How are you going today, Dr. Kelly?
Hello, Dina. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad that you were able to join us. Thank you for joining me. Is it Sunday there for you right now?
Yes, Sunday evening.
Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your Sunday evening and joining me to talk about this.
My pleasure.
So to start off with, do you mind telling the audience, I know a little bit about you, but do you mind telling the audience sort of how you got started into this and what sort of made you want to talk about civic engagement?
Well, I have been involved with volunteering, voting, and vocal activism since I was a young teenager until present day. And civic engagement is very important to me. I realize that it helps me figure out my chosen profession of social work because of the volunteering that I did. And in addition to that, the research that I did as an academician helped fuel the discussion of civic engagement in minority communities. So I really feel as though I'd come full circle with this entire subject, not just because it's meaningful to me, but it really helps me bring home how important this subject is to transforming communities.
Mm-hmm. And so how did you sort of get started? I mean, you talked about doing volunteering from a very young age. What sort of made you want to start volunteering?
Well, one of the things, and in the U.S., this is something that happens a lot. If you want to be included in the National Honor Society, you have to do community service. So my advisor said, do something that really makes you feel very good about yourself. If you're interested in a career, that's where you go. So I wanted to become a doctor, so I thought, okay, let me volunteer at a hospital. That was my first foray into volunteerism, where I would read to sick patients, help the nurses, deliver books to the infirmed. It was really a very eye-opening experience. And it taught me so much about myself. And that's what I think volunteerism and civic engagement really do. The impact for youth is that it builds self-esteem, helps with self-awareness, strengthens critical thinking and problem solving. All those things are critical in one's development from teenager to young adult.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty amazing how much you sort of underestimate how impactful volunteering is, especially when it comes to taking time out of your own day to sort of do something for others. And it could be something very simple, I guess. It could be helping out a neighbor, or it doesn't necessarily have to be assigned like volunteer stuff. But it's really amazing just how much it does impact you, because I love to volunteer when I can. And I know like there's a lot of communities that I sort of do try to help when I'm free. But I think it's the when I'm free part is that really hard part, especially in today's world where you expect everything to sort of come with money attached to it. And volunteering is just not that.
No, I think you're absolutely right. It's making a redemptive difference in the life of another human being and their community. If you can say that you have made a redemptive difference, if you have positively impacted another human being's life, no matter what you're doing, then you have made that change and you have affected them. That is power. And not only does it improve the well-being of the individual you're helping, it also impacts you as the engaged individual.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. I think it really helps. It really helps you in sort of figuring out, I mean, it helps you figure out what area you wanted to work in and what field you wanted to do. And you have no idea the amount of job opportunities that can sort of come, career opportunities that can come from it as well. So I think it's like, for me, especially when it comes to parenting and teaching a child to sort of volunteer, that's the really hard part. And that's definitely what we're here to talk about today when it comes to parenting. And I'm really excited for this. So before we get started, I love to do a little icebreaker to sort of get to know you a little bit more. So when I have these 5 different areas, just say the first sort of thing that comes to your head about them.
Sure.
Okay. So the first one is your favorite book.
Oh, well, I have 2 favorite books.
Okay.
The first one is Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. And it really helped me out because I'm looking forward to senior leadership positions in higher ed. So it's really helping me focus my attention on what do I need to do as a leader to be a servant to the people that I'm leading. And that's what Brene Brown talks about. And the second book that was really impactful on my career was Jack Kemp, The Bleeding Heart Conservative That Changed America. He has passed away, but he had an indelible mark on just how I see things in the United States. And really made an impression on me as a young person.
Okay. I think I've had both of those answers from so many guests before on both of those books. And it's definitely, I keep adding books to my reading list now that my reading list is probably miles high at this point. So,
yes.
But I think I started Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. I've gotten up to about halfway through the book, and it's just it's already pretty impactful. Like, I haven't read all the way through, and I'm already getting my highlighter and highlighting things of interest. And it's pretty incredible how she words things and how she sort of sees the world.
Yes.
So the next one is your favorite movie.
I have a few, but
Okay.
the one that never gets old with me is Forrest Gump. And the
Okay.
reason why that movie moves me and is meaningful to me is because it speaks about the innocence of the human spirit.
Yep.
And just that whole, where he questions his mother, what is my destiny? And she responds, you're going to have to figure that out yourself. Life is a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. I always thought that was so meaningful because it speaks to how simple life really is. And we make it so complex sometimes, but if you just sit down and reflect, you realize life really is very simple.
Yep. No, I completely agree. I think we make it very complicated. And yes, and that movie is by far one of the greatest at, like you said, it shows innocence. Even as they get older, they're still very naive and they still see the world with a whole lot of rainbows and a whole lot of sunshine, and they still try to see the positive in it. And I think that's why that movie will never get old, no matter where we end up in this world.
Exactly.
So the next one is your favorite podcast.
Oh, well, I just started listening to her. And it's The Assignment with Audie Cornish.
Okay.
She's a reporter with CNN. And I like how she has been very balanced and fair with her reporting on all things political and social. And she has reported on the COVID crisis and really tried to be as fair and balanced as possible with talking about COVID and how it's impacted communities. And so that's the podcast that I listen to. I'm just beginning to do the foray into podcasts. I'm new to the whole system.
Yeah.
So I'm just getting used to yours. So I appreciate the question, but I'm new to the whole field.
Yes, podcast is it's a very up and coming sort of area now. I mean, it just recently popped up for everyone to really enjoy. And there are a lot of podcasts. I think Brene Brown also has a podcast.
Yes, she does.
That she does as well. So I've started listening to that. I will start to research. What was the name of the show again?
Cornish.
Okay.
It's called The Assignment with Audie Cornish. Audie is her first name.
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. I've seen it, but I haven't listened to it yet.
It's just and it's a few moments. It's not too long. Just a few moments of information that's political, social, economic, all those things that can impact communities and people primarily throughout the United States.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I love that it's always like location focused, especially when it comes to podcasts, because when you hear about the world is every country sort of goes through different situations. And it's nice to see that there's one that's like one country focuses.
No, I agree.
Yeah. So next up is a famous role model.
Oh my goodness. Well, I have a few, but I will say, because I've been in academia for 20 years. the person that helped me best understand being a person of color in a predominantly white institution in higher education was Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. And the reason why she was so important to me is because she rose up through the ranks at the esteemed institution, Stanford University. And her early years were fraught with a lot of pain, a lot of just people not appreciating what she brought to the table as a scholar. And she just wouldn't, let that deter her. She put her head down, did her work, and she rose to become Provost, National Security Advisor, and Secretary of State. And she is a world-renowned expert on all things Russia. And when I was moving up the ranks in academia, I realized, Dina, I needed to put my head down and do my work, and all things will work out. And that's what I did. And she was an inspiration for me.
Wow, that's incredible to be able to take someone in sort of a similar situation, similar sort of background, and just be able to be influenced so much by her. And I think that's incredible. It's really nice, especially when it comes to being, because I'm Muslim, so it's very much a minority sort of focus, and especially when it comes to women in media, it's really hard to find women in media as a whole, but finding a Muslim woman in media is still a whole other sort of category. So
exactly.
I can definitely see how you find one person as an inspiration and just sort of see them all the way through. And I think that's incredible.
Thank you.
So the last one is a favorite course that you've completed.
One of the courses that I completed, because I'm an NCE fellow, one of the courses that I took was NCE's Agile Administrator, which focused on helping you understand the vulnerabilities of leadership, the adaptability of leadership, and how you need to be a servant leader as an agile administrator in higher education.
Okay, wow. That's very in a just how you are in the field. It's not teaching you what to do in the field, it's teaching you how to be in it. And I think that's very different. It's a very different kind of course.
Yes.
So how long was that course?
Oh my goodness, it was about 6 weeks.
Okay. That's a pretty hard focus. Yeah.
It was about an hour each week for 6 weeks, so 6 hours.
Oh, that's pretty good. Spaced out really well. No, I think that's great. So we've come to talk about a little bit more about civic engagement. And so first off, what do you think is your sort of definition on parenting?
Yes. Well, back in the day when I was a practicing social worker, I used to work with parents who lost their kids to foster care. And then on the cusp of getting their kids returned to them, I would always have a meeting with the parents to make certain they were prepared for their children coming back home.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I would always say to their parent your child in such a way that you want them to treat you when you are older and cannot make a way for yourself.
Yeah.
And they would always tell me, Diann, I cannot do that. What if they never forgive me? And I would respond, take it one day at a time. Show them love unconditionally. Show them humility. Show them your faith. Show them structure. And definitely show them gentleness. If you exemplify all those things, when you get old, they will treat you the same way and forgive you.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing about parenting. Many people don't realize, Dina, that parenting is a journey.
Yeah.
Not a destination. It's a journey.
Yes.
You'll
Yeah.
help an individual emerge from infancy to adulthood with questions along the way of their origin, of who they are, of what makes them tick, what's the meaning of life? And all those questions happen every day, all day long. And as a parent, you're the first line of defense to answer those questions. And that is why parenting is meaningful.
Yep. No, it's amazing just how varied that definition of parenting can be. Because everyone, like I said, everyone has their own very broad definition of what it is. And I've heard it be compared to mentoring, to being an influential person. And every time I sort of ask that question, it's sort of a question that I ask every guest that comes onto the show. And it really helps me define what it is as well. Because parenting, it's not just, okay, this is your child, you have to deal with it. This is someone that doesn't know a lot about the world yet, and you're the person that they're turning to in order to figure it out.
Yes.
So it's amazing.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay, you go. Go for it.
I used to say, when I would have the couple in front of me, the mother and the father, I used to always say to them that the mother holds the child to her bosom, nestles the child so that the child is always feeling safe. The father, however, hoists the child on the shoulders to show the world he will bequeath to the child. If that father has very little resources, that father is bequeathing his dreams for the child.
No, I think that's pretty amazing as to how it is. And I love that there's a very different need for each parent. And there are some people who are really lucky enough to have both sides to it.
Yes.
Yeah, especially when it comes to sort of trying to teach them how to be in the world. And as nurturing as a mother can, a father is definitely, I know my dad, but my parents are very different ways in their parenting. So my dad really loved to show by example. And it's pretty incredible to see how influential that just by showing by example can be.
No, you're absolutely right. And just the research on attachment theory alone, mothers and fathers have different relationships with their children. And the children gravitate to each parent differently based on how they perceive the parent protecting them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all attachment theory. It's very influential, and it definitely impacted my research, on generative parenting.
Yeah, I think different parents have different ways of attachment, and that sort of really gets handed on to the child. And it's really interesting to see how influential even that sort of pattern of how close you want to be with your child impacts the child itself. So the next question, what do you think the expectant parent needs to be aware of in their transition to parenthood?
Yes, that's a great question. I always say whether you physically have the child or you're adopting the child, and it goes back to what I said before, you have to know that parenting is not an end destination, that it is a journey. And the cycle and development of the young child is so critical to thinking about what are you prepared to do for the child as an infant. You need to show them unconditional love. You need to show them gentleness. You need to communicate with the child. And communicate with the child, I'll give you a very good example about it. We need to read to our children from the time that they are born. Not only does this reading affect critical thinking, but it also challenges and develops the cognitive skills. Just reading to the child alone during infancy helps develop cognitive skills. And those cognitive skills help with social development, help with self-awareness, with the whole concept of sharing, which goes back to an altruistic, rich family environment. Just being able, that whole concept of sharing meals with your child while they're eating. Can I have some of your ice cream? Sure, honey. Here's a scoop. That's understanding the concept of sharing. So when you go to kindergarten or early childhood and some kid says, can I share your toy? Sharing is not some alien idea. You actually know how to share because you learned it in the family context. And that's what expected parents should be prepared for, knowing all the nuances of living with a growing individual who is learning so much about themselves in a family context.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with the first part that you said about it's not the end of something when you talk about parenting. It's not the end of your life and the start of someone else's. It's still like we talk about it as if it's a happily ever after kind of situation, especially when you have both parents who being expectant parents, and that's sort of, okay, that's the end of the story and a whole new chapter is starting, but it's still pretty much the same story. It's just a whole other sort of part to it. And
yes,
it's pretty interesting when people say, okay, so my life is ending because I'm becoming a parent. Like this whole other part of them is ending that they used to be. And
no, it's a beautiful journey. I'll be honest with you, Dina. I love being a mom.
Yeah,
I have watched my two daughters, who are now 24 and 17. I have watched them grow and develop into phenomenal women who really do incredible work and have great friends, are great friends to other people, and these are just wonderful women. And I'd like to think that my husband and I had a hand in that, but those were the early years that we shaped their development. A lot of their development was shaped by their experiences outside the home. And they come back home with questions of, well, this happened today, what should I do about it? And that is where development begins, where the self-awareness begins, where the self-esteem begins, where they understand that who they are is an extension of family, of their early experiences in the cocoon of early development.
And I think that slides in perfectly with why we're here and the influence that community has in a child's development. So to start off with, how would you define children's civic engagement?
Sure. It's being able to transform a community, the one stage of development. And those, I'll give you a very good example. Professor Connie Flanagan, who is Professor Emeritus at University of Wisconsin in Madison, she wrote the book Teenage Citizens. And one of the things that she talked about was how youth renovate outcomes in communities and transform communities through their work. I would add to her definition that it, in addition to that, it is volunteerism, voting, and vocal activism. One of the things, and I don't know how it met itself out in Australia, but back in 2020 and 2021, here in the United States, we had many marches following the George Floyd murder. Do you remember that?
Yes, I remember that.
And a lot of the people who were marching were Gen Zers who took up the mantle of social justice and civic engagement to say, we will not take this anymore. And it was a powerful demonstration of just a whole new generation of youth being guided to social justice. And that's what I would define it as, really transforming communities one group at a time. That's what I would say is youth civic engagement.
And I think, like, especially when it comes to that example of the George Floyd case and how impactful that is on people, not just in the US, but everywhere in the world. And I think on the same day as the US had the protest, I think every country sort of did it at the same time. And we were all, I remember it so clearly. And it was it was a big community that came together worldwide, no matter where you're from, no matter where you are. And that stood for something that was so unjust and stood for justice as a community. And I think we underestimate, like, honestly, for me, personally, I think we definitely underestimate how impactful protesting is, and standing for, and marches are, and peaceful protesting is a very big thing.
And that's why I see the whole crux of civic engagement is vocal activism. We had the civil rights movement change things for Black people because it started with a small group of people and mushroomed to a movement that transformed laws, that changed communities, that changed education policy. It made a significant difference. And again, for millennials and Gen Zers, you can see the same, movement happening with social justice. And for those two generations, social justice is very important.
Yes, no, I think so, especially when it coming into the new world that we are leading into today, where everyone is able to have a say, and they realize that they're able to have a say in how their world is being run. And I think when it comes to civic engagement and just being part of the community, I think like in America, I know in the US, I think voting's not you don't have to vote. There's no you choose to vote or not. In Australia, in Australia it's very different, where you have to vote. And so it's a whole lot of other things, but I think when it comes to, from what I've seen in Australia at least, is a lot less people are taking part in it actively. And even though by law we're supposed to vote, there is still that whole thing of people just aren't interested in it. People aren't, because I think like in a way, I think I kind of understand that, in a sense that there aren't a lot of people that would be trying to fight for justice rights. And I think that's what sort of stops the whole thing about voting, and that's sort of like the interest in voting, the interest in taking part, is just that you don't always see a change in everything that you fight for. And that's the big part of it. Especially when it comes to the leaders, you're trying to figure out who to trust and who will actually go with their word. And no matter where you are, there's still no guarantee that it will be the case.
And that's the whole crux of voting, that you have to vote with a sense of hope. The two are inextricably linked, voting and hope. And you have to believe that the people leading you are doing the best job they can possibly do. One of the things that I'm working on this in an upcoming book that I'm editor of called Volunteerism. And one of the things that I talk about in the book is that when people are looking for their leaders, they want someone who is forward-thinking, who is a problem solver, who sees the big picture, but who knows how to get through the weeds.
Yes.
And that is critical. That's what people want. They don't want all this partisan bullcrap and messy mess. They want someone who's going to sit at the table, collaborate, unify, and move the respective country forward.
Yes.
That's what people want out of their leader.
No, I 100% agree. And I think especially in this day and age, it's very important to find that. So going into sort of the parenting side of it all, like parents are trying to be as influential as they can. How do you sort of find the correlation between civic engagement and parenting?
Yes. Well, parents are critical in fostering an altruistic, rich home environment.
Mm-hmm.
From the early years of a child's development, they learn sharing, they learn caring, they learn chores, meaning eventual work ethic. And all these things help a child understand who they are, what their place is in the world, and how they can give themselves to another individual.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how the importance of that is the parent showing the child how to act. One of the things that I learned from my grandfather, my grandfather used to take my mom, my aunt, and my uncle to the polling places, and in his pickup truck, he would drive around to the elderly to pick them up so they could vote.
Mm-hmm.
When I was young, my mom and dad, you would take me to the voting booth with them, and I used to watch them vote for individuals, and I would also always ask them, well, how do you know that person is the right person? And my mom would always say, because I believe in them.
Mm-hmm.
So come to me. As early as I could, I was taking my children to the voting booth and really helping them see that we have an impact on who leads us. The one time you have a say in who sits at that table is when you vote. So when my daughter turned 18, we made certain she was ready to vote and everything. And it was like a rite of passage that she was able to, cast her vote. And as if you asked her, she would tell you she really had no idea what she was doing. But she really, emphasized that me and my husband taught her well, and she did the best she could in the voting booth. So that's what I would say the correlation between parenting and youth civic engagement is fostering an altruistic, rich home environment that exemplifies giving back to others.
Yeah, and I know that they say, like, they have the whole saying of it takes a village to raise a child. And
Yes.
and I think that really fits into this discussion today because it's really a big part. I mean, like you said, a parent can do so much as to just showing them, teaching them what it is, and then hoping that they have they've learned enough in order to take control when they get to an age where they need to vote. So how impactful, I mean, especially with your children as well, how impactful was the community in sort of how they were raised?
Extremely impactful. Dina, there's no way I would not be the mom that I am if it weren't for the examples of my parents. And my husband wouldn't be the dad that he is if it weren't for the example of his parents. So those examples were meaningful. But in addition to being examples, the grandparents were very involved in the raising of our children. In addition to that, I am a former Girl Scout leader. So my daughters were involved in Girl Scouts until my eldest was 13 and my youngest was 6. And we're also involved in Jack and Jill, which allows us to develop ourselves as far as leadership and community service in the community. And it really does take a village. There's no way my girls turned out the way they are because of that village, because of our friends, because of their godparents, because of their grandparents, because of their aunts and uncles, because of their cousins. They're who they are because of the village.
And I think it's really lucky to have a family, to live near family as well. And I think that's a big part of it all. I sort of because my family, we moved around a lot. So we always in different places. I don't think I ever really lived near my grandparents until recently. So it was a big difference when it came to having my grandparents around and just being able to see them and being able to have actual conversations with them that sort of made an impact on how I saw the world. And I didn't realize how much, how important it was until I had them there, and just being able to sort of have a different opinion to what I grew up thinking, what I grew up seeing. And I can definitely understand how, I'm really amazed at my parents for being able to move around and just never sticking with a community to be able to raise us at just the two of them, because I had no idea how they were able to do it half the time. And I definitely think if they stuck around in one place, it would have been different. But it was really nice to sort of see that how important community is. And I'm grateful now that they're not moving around anytime soon, so we're able to stick around. So the next part is talking about the types of civic engagement, the types of different community events that sort of take place. Are there any specific types of the sort of civic duties and civic engagement that parents should be aware of?
Well, I'll go back to what I said a few moments ago. Developmentally, think about scouting for girls and boys. Scouting is a rich activity that not only exposes a child to community service and being a leader, but it also helps with self-esteem. It helps with self-awareness. It helps with social skills and one's social network. And just being around, adults and other children who are like-minded, it helps you figure out, wow, I like this about myself. I like how I mastered this skill. And it really makes you see yourself differently. So scouting is one. There's also the 4-H club that is international. They do a lot of work with community development. And young people can be involved in 4-H as early as primary school.
Okay.
And then in addition to those two, there's the environment. You can do gardens, gardens where you have community gardens, recycling, or and community cleanups. And that can also be done as early as primary school. So those are the three areas I would have parents kind of look to. And it's really trying to figure out what is the best fit for your child and their personality.
So, I mean, you often hear the saying, sort of, do your civic duty to society. How relevant is that in a sort of community participation?
Do your civic duty. It goes back to the three elements that I raised before: volunteerism, voting, and vocal activism. From a young age, you can have a hand in any of those three areas. In the U.S., you're not allowed to vote until you turn 18. I don't know how it is in Australia.
I think it's the same age.
Same age?
Yeah.
So, but one of the things that we saw during presidential campaigns is young people who are 16 years old campaigning for a presidential candidate. And that can give you an exposure to the electoral landscape that governs your existence. So to me, it really is about voting, volunteerism, and vocal activism. Those three areas are critical to civic participation.
Okay. So those are really big sort of areas. They're not very small sort of categories. They're very big when it comes to does that sort of impact a child's developmental skills as well, those three areas?
Yes. It goes back to what I said before about social networks, social skills, work ethic. It teaches you so much about yourself and who you are and what you bring to the table. And if you, volunteerism alone teaches you work ethic, teaches you social skills. And voting has a lot to do with hope and faith, being forward thinking. Another thing about volunteerism is that it helps with problem solving, which is a developmental skill. And vocal activism has to do with social network, social grouping, problem solving, critical thinking, self-awareness, all those things. So those are the benefits of those three areas.
Okay. So we talked about different ages and how, like, for example, 18 is when they're able to vote. There are a lot of children of so many different ages that are trying to get into the community and trying to understand civic duty and things like that. What types of civic participation are appropriate for children of various ages?
Yes, as early, you can start as early as 5, 6 years old with community gardens. There are many organizations out there that are focused on beautification of communities. And you can start as early as 5, 6 years old with community gardens.
Okay.
Community cleanup. And then also recycling. Being able to say to a child, when they look at that community garden, you did this. It makes a difference in how that child sees themselves and views their community, especially if they're coming from a community that is socially disorganized with high crime and that sort of thing. They need to see something beautiful emerging from their community.
It's nice, especially when it comes to community gardens. You get to see, like you said, you get to see something that that they made and something that they can be proud of. And I remember going to community gardens as a kid and sort of just being a part of it and seeing people of so many different ages taking part and being a part of it and just joining in. And it's really nice to have that availability. And I know that not a lot of places do have that opportunity, because it's a really big thing to sort of take part in. And I don't think a lot of areas are able to have that. The area that I'm in now, for example, doesn't have any sense of that whatsoever. And it made me really lose that sense of togetherness that you could feel with a community that I used to grow up in.
Yes, I grew up in the city. I live in a suburb now, but when I grew up in the city. And I would visit my grandfather in rural South Carolina. And I learned from an early age the importance of giving back to the community. I learned that from everyone in my family, that your destiny is to give back to your community. Wherever you see someone needing help, you give them help. Wherever you see someone needing clothes, you give them clothes. Your destiny is to give back to the community. That's how I was raised. That's how I raised my children.
That's an incredible way of being taught. And I think that goes back to leading with example as well, teaching a child through actions rather than just telling them they need to do it. And I think, so how different is that when you compare sort of telling a child that they need to do this and showing them what they should be doing?
Showing is more meaningful. That means you're exemplifying the action that you want the child to take. It is being a role model. You can tell someone a whole lot of things, and it goes in one ear and out the other. But if you do it, and you do it together, one thing my mom used to always say, I want you to give back. I want you to, give up yourself. And then when I was a young adult, we joined the Red Cross together and volunteered together with the Red Cross. And we did that for about 3 years. And I think my mother and I became closer because of the volunteerism that we did together. And it allowed me to see her differently as she was leading one of the initiatives that we were working on for the Red Cross. And I never forgot that. It really was a powerful moment for me, just to be with her, enjoy her, see how much of a difference she made in the lives of the clients of the Red Cross. And to see a Black woman who came from humble beginnings make a significant difference in the lives of other Black individuals who had meager beginnings. So it was an incredible experience.
No, that sounds really inspirational as well. I mean, it sounds like such a great role model to have growing up. Yeah, for sure. So going into some of the challenges in sort of fostering or adapting to civic engagement, what are the most common challenges that parents experience when developing a child's sense of community?
The biggest challenge, I would say, is that where you're leading the child is not a good fit for the child. Mm-hmm. Not every child is an ideal person for scouting. Mm-hmm. You know, maybe they're more of that child who would find it more satisfying to read books to young children at a local library. Mm-hmm. That's moving for them. You have to ask a child, what do you want to do? In the early years, when they're young, you can probably lead them to different activities. But when they say, why do we have to do this? You say, because you're giving back. We're going to give of ourselves. We're going to make a difference. You're going to do something good for someone else. But as they get older, you want the child to have a say in where they will go. Mm-hmm. And if that means that they're no longer interested in scouting, they're more interested in social justice, then you will allow the child to do that. I remark, and I am moved as a researcher on civic engagement by the youth who emerged from that Parkland shooting that happened several years ago in Florida at the Marjorie Douglas School. And I am moved by those youth who, had a significant movement against gun violence and, promoting gun reform and really standing up to the NRA and saying, under no circumstances can we live with these laws the way they are. There need to be sensible gun laws. And I was really impressed by them because they were young as 15, 16 years old. Mm-hmm. And they had the presence of mind to move adults. Mm-hmm. And that is the power of civic participation. Allowing a child, once they come into their teen years, the decision to go their own way and be engaged in the way that makes them feel good about themselves.
Mm-hmm. And I think that is a great example of a child determined to try to make a difference. I know that there are also some cases where it's completely the other way and a child has absolutely no interest in doing that. And sometimes, for example, when you talk about how important it is and then you say, some children have a lack of empathy and a lack of really understanding, how would you get those children to sort of really find a place to take part?
Wow, that's the hard part. Mm-hmm. Because you can, during the early years, I would say from 5 to 10, you can drag a child and I use the word drag, you can drag a child to getting engagements where they're going to do something for someone else. But once a child is of middle school age, 11 and older, it really makes a difference for the child to determine where they want to use their energy. And if they don't decide, then you're going to have apathy, you're going to have discontent, and that's not how you want a young adult to emerge and have their own decision about where they want to give their time and energy. So that's why I'm saying, by the time a child is 11 years old, if they don't want to be engaged, allow them to do sports, allow them to do dance, allow them to do whatever makes them happy. Because it's still developmental. And the child is finding out who they are as they're developing. So that when they emerge into young adulthood, they can say for themselves, oh, I want to be involved in environmental causes because I really believe in climate change. And that is meaningful then at that moment to that person.
No, I think that's it's amazing just how many different areas that a child can get involved in when it comes to playing a sport or taking art classes. Like, it's still developing that sense of other people are around and this is how you should behave. I think it doesn't help in behavioral skills as well, in the sense of those sort of areas as well.
No, I agree with you. It really does make a big difference. That's why I am a firm believer that after a certain age, the decision of where I should be engaged should come from the child.
Okay.
You can, as parent, help direct that decision. But the challenge is, what is a good fit? Where should the child go to give of themselves and their energy and their time? What would be the more favored outcome of a child's engagement? And the child has to decide that.
Okay. So I guess you can do as much as you can as a parent and sort of guide them as well as you can, and then just hope that they learn enough from you that they can go out into the world a little bit more with a social aspect.
Yes.
So for more parenting tips, what are some of the best practices, in your opinion, that parents can adopt in developing a child's civic engagement?
Oh my gosh. Do it together and communicate. And this goes back to what I had said early on when we were talking about parenting. When you're during infancy and you're reading to a child, and as the child goes into toddler years and early childhood years, they're always asking questions about, but why? And you're like, because the communication never ends. As a child gets older, the conversations become more complex, and they want to know, what is the meaning of X? And why do people do this? You know, the whole, the recent police beating of the gentleman in Memphis. I don't know if you guys heard about that.
I haven't on my side. I'm pretty sure it's there, but I just haven't heard it.
Yes, it happened in Memphis back in January. And you have children saying, but I don't understand why the police did this.
Yeah.
And they're asking you, the parent, and you, the parent, have to come up with an explanation for something that even our leaders can't figure out. And that's what I'm saying. Communication is so critical as we're moving from infancy to the end of teenage years. Communication. That's how you're going to get a child engaged, is through communication and by doing the engagement together.
Yeah.
Because you're modeling the behavior, the civic rich behavior that you want your child to do. And you do that by modeling the behavior, doing the engagement together, and communicating what your expectations are and what the child should expect.
And I think that leads perfectly into our next little segment called Practice and Habit. So what is your practice to improve your parenting and developing your child's civic engagement?
It goes back to what I just mentioned, communication. We talk about engagement, participation. I sit on the boards of organizations, and they see through my activity what is expected of them. And it makes me feel good that I'm leading by example. My husband is on the board of organizations that make a difference in the lives of other human beings. And we enjoy what we do. And that's why our children will eventually do the same thing as they get older. But in the meantime, they are understanding what is doable for them in the here and now at their age of development, because they're young.
Yeah.
So what can they do while they're young?
Yeah. So when it comes to communication, especially in your family about civic engagement, what are 3 positive things that you've found going about this practice?
Oh my gosh. 3 positive things. I would have to say faith is a big part of it. And unconditional love for your insular family, as well as your love for other people. And I think the most important out of all the 3 is kindness.
Okay.
Really knowing that if you are kind to another human being, it opens the door to a rich relationship. And it allows both of you to see what is similar between the two of you. Because we live in a world where people are quick to see what our differences are.
Yep.
And if you can show faith, love, and kindness, you realize how similar we are and how we are striving for the same thing, which is stability and security.
No, it's amazing how well those three fit together, and how important each of those areas are in not only a family, but in a community as well, and how impactful it can be to each individual that gets to face it every day. So in contrast, what are some of the challenges that you face when going through communication in your family?
Oh my gosh. I would say the challenges are dealing with lack of hope. You know, when you're faced with a child whose thoughts about their future has been diminished by some crisis that happened in the world, and they come to you with tears in their eyes about how could this have happened in today's society.
Yes.
As a parent, you want to hug your child and tell them everything is going to be okay, but you know that it won't be, because the world is focused on differences, hatred, and violence. And so you try to pick your child up, give them as much information as possible about how they can be a redemptive difference in the life of other people. And how can they do that? So you focus your attention on who your child is, what their strengths are, and try to foster a sense of hopefulness in them so that they can go back out into the world stronger because you gave them hope.
Yep.
But that's really what I would say is the challenge, is when your child is facing lack of hope and you have to explain why the world is the way it is.
Yep. No, I think that's a really incredible answer to go along with it, because it's, especially in today's society, there's still a lot of things that we're all lacking. And I think you said it earlier, we're all seeing the differences first, and we're all seeing what I have that you don't have, rather than seeing what we have in common. And I honestly think that that's, if we just change our way of thinking, that could honestly save so much time, so much energy, and just have a whole different impact on how society is run. But I think lack of hope is definitely something that I think, especially in our generation, because I think I'm pretty much the same age as your oldest daughter and going through that.
Yeah, so you're a Gen Zer.
Yes. And definitely faced with the challenge of trying to figure out how we are in the world and how we can make a difference, especially with when in society a lot of people still see our age in the early 20s as being children and not really having much to say. And I think we forget how impactful our early 20s, how impactful that we can be. And a lot of people do underestimate young adults and underestimate children as to what they have to say.
Yes.
With a lack of life experience, especially. And I think we definitely underestimate how we can sort of have an impact.
No, I agree with you, because when I was growing up, there was that old adage that children should be seen and not heard. Mm-hmm. And my family did not buy into that. Mm-hmm. That when we would sit at the dinner table, my father would always ask my brother and I what our opinions were of the political events, the headline in the newspaper, what was going on in the community, mm-hmm. what we thought. And we mm-hmm. had to speak intelligently about this issue. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I was nervous because I always felt maybe I didn't know enough. So it made me make certain that the next time we sat down for dinner, I was aware of everything that I needed to be aware of, because I had no idea what the conversation at dinner was going to be. Mm-hmm. So, it really makes a big difference when you can instill hope in your child and meaningful, meaning.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree with you. I think children have so much to say, and a lot of it is they ask questions we don't know the answers to, but they ask questions that we need to ask ourselves as well. And the amount of times that I have some of my friends' children, they come up to me and they ask so many different weird questions, but some of them are really questions that I wouldn't even know to ask. But they have such an understanding of a world that's very different from us, and I think they have so much they could teach us if we just sort of hear them out. And I think it's very interesting how parents don't still have that be seen and not heard understanding of children.
Yes, and that was the thought process when the Parkland shooting students had their movement, that they were acting out of their wheelhouse. Mm-hmm. And I was one of those people. I said, one of the most beautiful things that I've ever seen was young people standing up and fighting for justice.
Yep.
It was a beautiful sight.
Yeah, it really was. I think I remember a little bit of the speech and just the way that some of the students were able to say what they thought without getting emotional, without getting irrational. They're just so coherent. Everyone could understand what they were saying and what they were wanting. And they said they spoke better than most adults that you see on the street. And that was what amazed me the most.
No, I totally agree. And it is, they're still actually involved in the movement. Mm-hmm. And they've made a critical difference.
Yes, no, 100%. So now we're going into the questions from audience. We do have quite a lot, but a lot of them seem to be very similar. So I'm going to keep to a few of them. So why is it important for children to be involved in civic engagements?
Oh, that's a great question. Not only is it developmentally sound and leads to a lot of benefits as far as self-esteem, social skills, social networking, problem solving, critical thinking, self-awareness, but it also changes the life of an individual and their community.
Mm-hmm.
And the I would say the tentacles of that child's impact are profound because it enables that child to have a reach beyond their individual person and their family.
Mm-hmm. So the next one is, how can civic engagement activities be adapted for children with disabilities or special needs?
Oh, that's a great question. Because children with special needs is a very important issue for me because I have written articles on that. One of the things that I would say is that scouting, 4-H, and community gardens and library volunteerism all have made it their mission to be inclusive of youth with special needs and disabilities. And so not only is the child with disabilities or who's neurodiverse, not only is the child receiving help, but for whatever the activity is, they are showing how capable they are in delivering services to another individual. And that is critical. When you talk about neurodiverse, and that's children with autism, ADHD, or learning disabilities, but being able to show that you are just as good as an able-bodied individual, to show that you're just as good is powerful and has a lot of impact on one's self-esteem. So this topic is very important to me, and I want parents of neurodiverse children and disabled children to know that their child can be included in engagement activities and civic participation, because that is where we're moving toward. In scouting, 4-H, community gardens, that's what we're moving toward.
Yeah. No, I love how developed it's starting to get, and they're not just saying, okay, you have to be careful about the child that's participating because they're disabled, they have some disability, but they're actually trying to engage children with disabilities as much as possible.
Yes.
And there are a lot of things that, yes, there's ways that they can sort of work around it and they can sort of change the way it is, but they're trying to make it seem as normal as possible. And I love that they're able to do that now, especially when it comes to volunteering. I know that there's a lot of, for example, a radio station that I follow that's based in Australia, they have volunteer for, but they have specifically for children with disabilities. So they have like this sort of area where the children with disabilities are able to come onto the show and take part in radio, take part in learning a bit more about it. And I love how engaging that is, because one that sort of opens them up to a career idea that they can, a job that they can make out of it.
Exactly.
And they have hope in their head that they're able to do something, that they're able to take part in it. And I think that's what a lot of children with disabilities love seeing. They love seeing that they can still do something.
Yeah. And that they're not so different from other children.
Yes, exactly.
They just have an infirmity. That's it.
Yeah.
But they're similar to other children, and that is meaningful.
Yes, no, I 100% agree with that. So the next question is, what advice would you give to parents or educators who want to help children become more civically engaged but aren't sure where to start?
There's lots of places to start. I don't know what they have in Australia, but here in the U.S., we have United Way, we have AmeriCorps, we have Campus Compact, we have the Red Cross. We have a lot of organizations that can get you a list of places where you can look into for your child. But one things I would, if we're talking age appropriate and you want to start young, scouting, 4-H, soup kitchens, which, or food pantries, because you may not be able to serve the hungry as a young child. But in the food pantries, you can maybe stock the shelves and learn as an 8-year-old about hunger in your country or your community.
Yeah.
And that's critical. You can do that even in your school. Volunteer in your school, in the food pantry, because so many schools here in the U.S. have pantries so that children who are food insecure can take home food and feed their families. And so, as a child of meanness, you can help stock the pantry and know that you're helping a fellow student who is food insecure.
Well, that's a really, I've never heard of the food pantry. I don't think we have that in Australia, and I think that's
Really?
No, yeah, never went to a school here that actually did that, and I think usually they had a tuck shop or a canteen, and that was pretty much it. And it was usually just parents who volunteered to run it or to cook the food, and most kids brought their own lunches or provided some, but I don't think I ever went to a school that actually had that sort of participation from children.
No, I'm telling you, Dina, it is several years in the making. We have it in schools, and we have it in colleges.
Oh, wow.
Because there is food insecurity in colleges. Yes. And so if you're not able to afford the meals, you go to the food pantry and you pick up different food for yourself, and you take it home or take it back to your dorm, and you're able to eat.
Wow,
the same precepts exists for primary to high school years.
Wow. I think that's very interesting because I've never heard of that here. I'm pretty sure it might just be something that's that's for the US specifically.
It may be. I don't know. I just know that we're doing a lot with food pantries. One thing I will say to you is that Feeding America, which is a national organization here in the U.S., was the top charity for 2022, outpacing United Way.
Wow.
And a lot of that had to do with the fact that the pandemic increased food insecurity and hunger for so many families across the U.S.
Yes. Yes. And that had a huge, I know I see it over here as well. You watch it on the news and you see how people could barely eat. People could barely, because they had to pay rent, they had to pay all these other things. And I mean, rent wasn't going down either. Rent was pretty much they made it more expensive because of the lack of jobs. And there were so many things that sort of just didn't work out. And you definitely saw so much. I am so proud of a lot of communities who are able to sort of pretty much beg people to take part and beg people to sort of be a part of it and to help donate food as much as you can for people who are able to. And especially during COVID times, I think it was incredible to see the community that came together a whole lot more than usual to help people who they've never even met before.
Yes. And that makes a huge difference, is knowing that you're there but for the grace of God go I.
Yeah.
I could be that hungry person. I could be that person without shoes. I could be that person without a winter coat.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. And the amount of help that people were able to give was incredible in every case, whether it's providing. I know a lot of people that I know helped pay a lot of other people's rent for a couple of months because they could be able to, and pay heating bills, and through summer pay aircon and everything like that. And they were able to just really come together as a community. And I think COVID really showed that side of a lot of people.
And I agree.
So we're coming on to the very last part, which is the open mic. And you're able to share anything that you're either working on, passionate about. It doesn't necessarily have to be about the topic. It could be something that you're working on. I would love to give you the floor and just allow you to share in the last couple of minutes, just share anything that you are wanting to share with our audience.
Well, the main thing that I'm dealing with right now, I am a fellow with the American Council on Education, and it's allowed me to work with another university. I'm currently at Adelphi University. That's where my job is. But the fellowship is allowing me to work with Shenandoah University in Virginia. And I'm learning so much about my leadership style, who I am as a leader, what I bring to the table. It's made me very understanding why people choose college and what they want out of their college experience.
Okay.
It has helped me understand that the student and faculty are assets to a higher education environment, and that the student needs to see value and the faculty member needs to have academic freedom. And both of those individuals need to have their needs met. So I'm learning a lot from the leadership here at Shenandoah, and I'm looking forward to bringing back as much information and new ideas, etc., to my job at Adelphi, and just really be impactful to the students who want to call Adelphi home.
Okay. It's incredible just how the work that you're doing and that you're able to sort of see both the faculty but also see the student and determine which is determine how you can sort of combine the two and make sure that they are able to both freely have a say in what their university is going to be like.
Yes.
So how long have you been going through this process and doing this work?
Which work, the fellowship or academia?
The fellowship.
The fellowship started last August.
Okay.
So I was chosen in March of 2022 and went to a few meetings, and in August, that's when I started. So I've been here in Virginia since August 2022.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's amazing. That's very new, but it seems like you've you've learned a lot already in that short amount of time. So it's incredible.
Yes, I have learned. I've learned a lot about senior leadership, but more importantly, I've learned a lot about myself.
That's always really nice to hear. I love when different jobs sort of impact you in a different way and teach you a lot more about yourself as well. So I definitely applaud that, and I definitely applaud your work that you're going through as well, and how impactful that would be to future students that join Adelphi and sort of go into academia.
Thank you, Dina.
That's all right. Well, it was a pleasure having you on, Diann, and be able to talk about this and share your thoughts about civic engagement, as well as sharing some of your background as to how impactful your parents were in sort of shaping how you are going to be, and also the generation that sort of passed on to your children as well. And it's incredible to see just how generations are impacted in how you see life and how you see your work.
Thank you. It really, I'm very happy.
No, you should be. You should be very proud as well. So it's, if there is an audience member that would like to get in contact with you, is there a way that they are able to?
Sure. My email address is Kelly, Kelly, the number 5, at Adelphi, ADELPHI.edu.
Okay, perfect. I will have that down in the link below in the description, and then you're able to go straight down to Dr. Kelly and hopefully get in contact with her.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Raising Parents, the Parenting Science Insights podcast, produced by the Parenting Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives, and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcasting apps available on your smartphone. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, share, and subscribe to our channel so that other people can find it and we can continue to provide quality content. More of our work can be found on our website at pa.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Dina Sargeant, and thanks for tuning in.